Being able to tell a good story and narrate the history of your world is an important part of what you do as a game master. Telling them the rich and intricate history of how your world is interconnected is all a part of running a good game session. However, sometimes it can get a little boring when a GM is going on and on narrating about detailed history and lore, and you'd like them to just go and read it for themselves. I'm going to show you 4 ways today to use your online campaign manager during your game. Welcome to GM Vault. All right, keeping your players engaged is one of the most important things you do as a game master. And sometimes telling long stories about the lore of your world, even though it may be incredibly valuable for them to know about this as they move into the next part of the adventure. There's always great techniques of integrating lore into your campaign. Your backstories and things like that should be integrated into your game sessions and your adventures so that they naturally need to figure out these things in order to make decisions about the next steps for the party. However, I found that there are 4 great ways to use some of the things that you've written in an online campaign manager, however you keep your notes, and to get your players to go and read it during an actual game session. Now, you don't want them spending their 30 minutes of the game reading these things, but you can create short articles that drive your characters to check things out by making it integral to the conversation that you're having as the game master narrator. All right, the first thing that I would do, and I've spoken about this in other videos, is make sure that you're doing a detailed session log. And for session logs, you need to know you don't have to write everything that happens, and unless you just have a gift for that. I do bullet points. I write down all the people that were involved and where they went and maybe some of the actions that they took. But sometimes I don't even have the time to write down everything that went on during a game. And so I make sure to make connections in those session logs. So that's the number one thing that I do to make my characters, or to give my characters, a resource outside of the game or even during the game, because I'll say, hey, why don't you go to last game session log, and you'll see I've got links there to every place that you went and the villains that you ran into. You might want to take a look at some of that. You'll find out first of all, you'll be able to remember their names, and you'll remember the name of that shop. You'll remember that was in the eastern part of this section. You can look at the maps and get a good idea of where you might want to go next. So session logs, that's number 1. The next thing that I like to do is I like to give them links to articles that have some meaning to where they're going or what they're doing. So, for example, in my last game, they go to Rishiki's Paper Goods, which is a little shop in the town where my players are at, and I'll show you that town in just a minute here. And I wanted them to get an idea of what it looked like inside. I do a little bit of narration, but, pictures can say 1,000 words. And so by giving them a picture of just something I found online sometimes, it's not always original art. I just grab it and throw it in my campaign manager, something for my players to get an idea of what they're looking at. Okay, and I'll send them over there, and before you know it, I use that description as well during the game. So I'll pull it up and I can remind myself, okay, who is Rishiki? What kind of voice should I be doing here? Is this an old guy? Is this, what's the race of the character involved? And are there some special things that they need to learn about this? I've talked about how I use what I call sandbox towns. And the town that my players were in during their last game session was a sandbox town, meaning just about everywhere that they go in my GM secret part of my campaign manager, I've put in there some kind of connection either to the major quest line or some kind of minor quest that they can get involved in. And it just gives me a place to go during my games to make sure I've got little things out there for the players to choose from. They can decide to go, to the west or to the east. Either way, I've got some kind of side quest involved or some kind of hook involved, and I keep that in the GM secrets. So whenever I pull that up during my game, while they're there reading the description, I'm reading the GM secrets, reminding myself, how do I talk like this NPC again? And what's the connection to the overall campaign, or is there a side quest involved? So I've got that right there. So that's the second way. I make sure that I give links during games to particular articles about where they're going or who they're talking to, because it helps me as a game master. I'm not flipping through my notes. I'm actually going to the place online that they are at during the game. The third way I use my campaign manager or my online notes during my game is I create word puzzles or number puzzles that might drive them to a particular article. So I'm going to show you how I did that during one of my games where they had to interpret a puzzle. I'm not going to make any, I'm not going to give you any brag or boasting about my puzzle making ability, because I just don't have the time to make some of the most awesome puzzles I've seen out there online. But I know how to make a basic word puzzle, and so I created one. It drove them both to the puzzle, which was a piece of paper that they received, and that it sent them to another article where they had to look particular words up in order to interpret the cryptogram that was involved in the note that they received. So that's another way. You can use puzzles and actual lore or books or notes that you have online in articles and send your players there during the game to make them actually use your campaign manager in order to get to the next phase of the adventure. And the fourth way that I use it is a very straightforward and simple map. So I'll pull up the map during the game. I've got pins to various locations, and they can scroll over there so they can look at the map during the game. And I also use the map myself to get an idea of maybe how long it's going to take them to travel from point A to point B. So it becomes a resource not just for me as a game master. If I just had my book of notes, that would just be for me. It becomes a resource that's shared. So I've got a section that the players are reading, the stuff that's out there in the open in the public eye, and then there's the GM secrets that I'm using during the game that are associated with that article. Okay, let's take some time to actually go and show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to actually show you these 4 different ways by using my online campaign manager. Okay, I'm here at Scabard RPG Campaign Manager, which is what I use, and this channel is kind of dedicated to giving tips and tutorials about, but it doesn't really matter which one you use as long as you use these 4 techniques to get your players involved in looking at your online lore. I'm a huge fan of Scabard because it is incredibly easy to use and not Byzantine and complex like a lot of the ones that are out there. Easy to use, online, available to my players, and I do 100% virtual games because I am in one state and they're across the country in other states. All right, so let's take a look. I'm going to log in here and I'll show you the 4 different ways that I use Scabard to get my players involved in reading my lore. The first thing that I mentioned was the session log. So in my campaign, I actually create a folder called Story, and it's the story so far. So you can look through, I can look through my campaign and find the current campaign that I'm on, which is the Lost City of Kohoritan. And here they will find my session logs. So they usually will favorite this location, and then they will go there and take a look at what I've written out for my session logs. As I mentioned before, my session logs, the first thing I do is I connect in everything that happened that I can remember that happened during the last game. And then I'll write a bulleted list of all the different things that I remember from the actions and events, so they can keep an eye on, how things went the last game. Because sometimes it'll, be 2 weeks or 3 weeks between games, and this way they can go back and take a look, and I can go back and take a look and remember what happened. So let's take a look at one of these. I've got one here, the most recent one, the Curse of Amha-Roths, and I'm actually going to choose this one because it's the most recent, and I still haven't written up an entire description of what went on during that game. And you'll notice all I did was I took about 5 minutes to connect in each of the different things that they ran into. So Pure Blood Revolutionary Army, they met an archer out in the jungles, and she was, taking out some orcs, and they decided to help out. So I mentioned the group that archer is with, the bracers there, and the town that they started this all in, Larakesh, which is my sandbox town. I've got that there. And then a location that they went to in the city city where they actually interacted with one of my NPCs. Now, I wanted to show you this functionality. Whenever I pull up one of these articles, and this is the second way to get your players involved in your lore and your campaign, is by just linking in an article so they can go there and check it out at the same time that you are using it. So where you could bring up your DM notebook and kind of flip to that page, sure, you could turn it around and show it to them, but I like this a little bit better because they're in another state and I'm here. They can pull it up. I've got a picture here just to give them, kind of an idea of what they're looking at. Sure, I could describe it, and I also do describe it. But when I take on the voice of Rashiki, the purveyor of paper goods. When they go inside, they also get this brief description here about maybe some rumors they might have heard in town. So I actually will tell them, if they read these articles, well, then you did a little investigating in town during your off time and found out a little bit about Rashiki's paper goods. No problem with that. It just gives them more of an encouragement and incentive to go in and read some of my world. But the other thing that I do is I've got a GM notes section here, the secrets down here, where I've got the prices for all the goods that this particular vendor is selling. And also here are some plot hooks that I leave in here about connections into the campaign. And of course, I do love the fact that this does an auto-linking. So if I type something out like the Borunai, it does an auto-link to that feature and will send them right to that page, or me right to that page, so I can remember, who are the Borunai? Oh yeah, that's right. It's a tribe of tabaxis that live in the Escarlin Wilds where they're hanging out. Okay, so that's two ways that I do it. I build out a session log, and then I also will use that session log to link to articles, or if they go somewhere during a game, I will pull up the article for them and for me. So I'll put a link in Roll20, which is what we use as our VTT. I use Roll20, and I'll stick that link in there and say, hey, you're going over to Rashiki's Paper Goods. You're welcome to take a look at it while at the same time that I'm taking a look at it, because these are my notes and you can also see your notes. Now, the nice thing about a good RPG campaign manager is you've got not only your main text that everybody can see, you've got secrets that only insiders can see. So, for example, if you had a player who was intimately connected with Rashiki or knew a little bit more, actually, maybe their backstory is they worked at Rashiki's Paper Goods, you could have them see the secrets here and sort of make that an inside player conversation. And then there is another section here, which I haven't used on this one, which is GM-only secrets, stuff that only I get to know. Even an insider won't get to see that. So this is a great way to use it during a game, is you've got these 3 layers of complexity in each of one of your articles. All right. One of the other ways that I use a campaign is through puzzles. All right. So I have this little note that if I can spell correctly, which often I cannot. I've got this strange map left in the idle room. So this was an actual item, an object that they received when they went and investigated one of the lost Temple of Amharaths, which is the storyline that they're just now finishing up, this mummy's curse that they had to deal with. And in there, they found this note from, this elderly explorer who's quite famous and has written several books, named Lord Vital Megillium, who left behind a little bit of a hint about how to find the lost city of Kahoritan. So, in this note, if they read it carefully, he makes mention of, I hope you had a chance to read of my travels. The Legend of Kahoritan is a great story. And as your former teacher, I recommend reading every section, sentence, and word. Hint, hint, hint. I'm not great at puzzles, but it's a good little cryptic way of saying, look down below. There are some numbers here that will give you a clue that I only want you to figure out and not the bad guy, who may also happen to read this because he says, if this is Belek, you're nothing but a disappointment. I don't want you to read this, and here's my little cryptogram just for my students. So in this, you'll notice I actually it automatically links to a chapter of a book in my lore in my online campaign manager called The Legend of Kahoritan. If they go to The Legend of Kahoritan, I just clicked on it there, it takes them here, which is a chapter with sections, and they used the code going back and forth. One person had it up on one screen, another person had it up on another screen, and 1D13 would be section 1, paragraph D, sentence 1, and there you go. So I think that's what I did. I can't even remember now. It's been weeks. It all goes past me really fast. 1D, 1C. Let's see, 1, and then D, and then 1, and then 3, I think is what it was. 3. So the third letter word, which is lost. All right. So that they then figured that out, and even I am confused now because I'm doing a video and my brain can't obviously do two things at once. All right. So that is the third way that I help my players engage with my campaign manager and build out the lore of the world. Now they're being forced to read the Legend of the Lost City of Kahoritan. Well, not forced, but in order to figure out this puzzle. And maybe they read it, maybe they don't. Maybe they'll read it carefully. Maybe they just read it for the cryptogram. Either way, you know, it gives them an opportunity to look at this article, which has lots of links to lots of different things, the primal gods and the Kelgood Mountains and the Ascarlan, who are these, you know, mysterious alien shaman in my world. And one more opportunity for me not to have to read the whole story to them, okay? And I didn't have to send it to them in an email. I didn't have to send them to a Google Doc. I sent them here because this is a lot more functional than me sending them a Google Doc or something like that where I have to manually put in the links. Now all I have to do is type it out and it automatically finds Al-Babrish, one of the ancient primal gods, right? So they might engage a little bit more with the lore of my campaign. Pretty cool. I think it's cool. All right. The fourth way I do it is through a map. And of course, to do that, I am going to take you to what I call my sandbox town, the town of Larakesh. So this is like their headquarters. Doesn't have to be. They can choose to go other places. I'm not, you know, I give my players a lot of choice, but they'll end up choosing Larakesh. It's the only big town in the area, and they have some allies there. They've got some enemies there. And so what I will do a lot of times is when we start the game, I'll say, hey, you're in Larakesh. I'm going to take you to Larakesh, and I'll take over the screen. We use a zoom or something like that for our games. And I'll just throw it up on the screen by pulling up map. All right. So I go to the tab. Here's the map. I zoom it out. And I'll say, okay, you guys, you spent the night over here. This is Neelan's Coffin, which is an inn located in Larakesh frequented by mercenaries. All right, you were hanging out there last week. Where would you like to go next? I know you guys mentioned that you wanted to have a meeting with the Atra. That's over here by the Shrine to Grok and the Museum of Grok. Is that where you want to go? Did you want to stop by the bazaar first, the Macaw Bazaar, which is like this, you know, market area? Did you want to go meet up with Jaddy, one of the NPCs who takes care of your mules, because horses don't go very far in the Ascarlan Wilds. They don't survive, and so they have to have mules. Do you want to go see Jaddy over here at Eamon Wainwright? Either way, I am using the map to kind of give them a geography of where they're headed. And as they, you know, decide to go somewhere else, like this last night, they went out to the Yashix region of the Ascarlan Wilds, which is like the big area that they're in right now. And I took them to that map so that they could see the places that they had already been. And again, you know, I'm generally sharing my screen on this, but a lot of times they will pull it up. I'll send in a link and they can pull it up themselves and save it. And so last night they actually went to the Screaming Lake here and had a couple of adventures near the Screaming Lake. And it really starts to engage them with going online with the lore to find out more about the Yashix region. They may go over here to the right-hand side and see some of those really cool, these, you know, connections that I've got in there. Okay. Those are the 4 ways I do it. Number 1, a session log after every week to make sure they've got the connections to each of the articles. That might engage them with additional lore and background in my campaign that I then don't have to narrate. I always try to work it into the game. If they've read it, I say, okay, that's something that you learned in your past or you heard somewhere. If it doesn't make sense, we'll figure it out. I'm pretty good at improvising with that. So I'll say, yes, you heard that in a rumor in the bazaar, or yeah, when you were hanging out at the hookah lounge, that's where you heard about this. In addition to that, I will link articles. I will use it at the same time they get to see their section, which is open to them. I'm looking at my GM secrets it, so I remember how to play that NPC and how to connect it into the bigger adventure, maybe with some plot hooks. Then I use puzzles, where I send them to one article, forcing them to read another article, or possibly showing them an image that they're going to use to solve a puzzle in a dungeon or something like that. And one time I actually had a diagram of the gods, symbols of the gods, and that is what they ended up using to solve a puzzle which got them through a door in a dungeon. So I use puzzles, I send them to those locations online. And finally, I use the maps. These are pretty straightforward, simple maps, but I do like the zoom map. I can bring it up, they can bring it up, and I can use the pens to sort of guide them through their travels through the town or the region or something like that. All right, that's pretty much it for today. If you have any questions, please put them into the comments. Like and subscribe. A lot of people watch these videos. They don't make it all the way to the end. They don't get to where I'm talking right now. But we really do need your subscription, so please do that. Click that button down there. I really would appreciate. We're just brand new channel, fledgling fetal-sized channel, and we're trying to grow it out, so please tell your friends. We hope that these tips and tricks are helpful, and that every time you come over to GM Vault, you find something that you're interested in. I'm Eric. This is GM Vault, brought to you by Scabard RPG Campaign Manager. I hope you have a great weekend.